Good evening and welcome to the Vegas PBS debate for candidates for Attorney General. I'm Steve Sebelius.
And I'm Elizabeth Thompson. Tonight's debate is being held in front of a studio audience. And for the next 60 minutes, we'll be posing questions to the Democratic and Republican candidates for Nevada's Attorney General.
Opening and closing statements for tonight's debate have been determined by a coin toss. And now Elizabeth will introduce the candidates participating in the debate.
They are Republican Adam Laxalt and Democrat Ross Miller.
Adam Laxalt, you have the first opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Nevada voters, for tuning in to tonight's debate. I understand the problems Nevada families face. I was raised by the most wonderful single mom. My wife Jamie and I are raising our 19-month-old daughter, and I'm joined here by my 88-year-old great-aunt, Sue Laxalt. As Attorney General, I will continue the fight against human trafficking. I will fight for victims against rape and domestic violence. I'll fight for our seniors that are the victims of fraud and abuse. Also, I'll work with our military community to get them access to affordable legal services. As Attorney General, I will fight for this state, and the most important thing about this job is to make sure that we talk about the level of experience. As a former Navy JAG officer, I was a prosecutor and a general counsel. And after graduating from Georgetown Law, I volunteered to go into the Navy and serve in Iraq. In Iraq, we worked to put away the world's most violent terrorists. I was nominated to be a professor of law at the U.S. Naval Academy, where I taught our nation's future leaders. As Attorney General, I'm honored to have, as an Attorney General candidate, I'm honored to have the endorsement of the majority of sheriffs and DAs in this state. They are endorsing me because they know I'll fight for Nevada's families. I'm also honored to have Governor Brian Sandoval's endorsement. They know I'll work hard every day to fight for a stronger and safer Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Laxalt. Now, Mr. Miller, your opening statement.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Let me apologize at the outset. I came down with a terrible cold today, so you're going to have to put up with some sniffling and some sneezing. But it was important for me to be here today because I want to outline my vision for the office of the Attorney General. What I've loved about being Secretary of State and now campaigning as Attorney General is that both of these positions are essentially about solving problems. And we have real problems in this state. We have con artists who come to Nevada and prey upon our aging population, trying to rip off our retirees and take away all the money that they've worked so hard to put away for their retirement. We have sexual predators who come to our community and refuse to come into compliance with our basic registration statutes so that our members of the law enforcement can track these individuals and make sure that they don't go out there and abuse our kids. I have experience solving real problems. First, as a criminal prosecutor in one of the busiest courthouses in the entire country, prosecuting everything from murderers to sex assault victims, perpetrators, and putting those criminals behind bars, working on the front lines to protect our community. And then as Secretary of State, stepping in as Chief Elections Officer, leading investigations that led to record fines being imposed to members of both parties, heading up the Securities Division and going after those scam artists. That experience is why over 4,000 cops throughout the state...
That's time on that opening statement. Sorry to interrupt. I'm sure we'll hear more of that as the debate proceeds. But let's go to our first question, and that will be for Mr. Laxalt. Attorney General Catherine Cortez Masto has made fighting human trafficking her signature issue. If you're elected to this office, what's going to be your signature issue?
Fighting for our most vulnerable is the most important thing we need to do in this job, and I've outlined numerous plans. I want to make sure that we're working for our seniors to prevent a lot of the fraud and abuse that occurs every single day. I want to continue the fight that Attorney General Masto's done for human trafficking. She's done an excellent job. She's put some criminal sanctions in place that now allow us to make sure we put these people behind bars and work harder and harder to free this state of human trafficking. I also want to work with our military community that say that the biggest need they have is access to affordable legal services. And we need to do everything we can for our military. I think everyone knows that. And I want to join Governor Sandoval and be his partner, where he is wanting to make Nevada the most military-friendly state in the country. And this kind of step would be great for our state.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Miller, your response.
As Attorney General, I'm going to work to protect kids and seniors in our community, to use the resources within the Office of the Attorney General to go after the offenders who refuse to come into compliance with our registration statutes, to protect kids in that capacity, go after internet crimes against kids, cyber crimes, go after these scam artists that continue to prey upon our aging population. I have real experience of doing that. First as a criminal prosecutor, where I worked to put these individuals behind bars, going to trial, convicting them, arguing before the Supreme Court to make sure that those convictions were ultimately upheld. I have experience doing that as Secretary of State. I can build upon that experience to lead this office, to use the resources to make sure that we protect kids and the most vulnerable members of our community.
Thank you. Mr. Laxalt, your rebuttal?
You know, the most important thing of this job is to work hard every single day to continue to protect our most vulnerable. As it relates to human trafficking, the majority of the problems for human trafficking are coming from children that are slipping out of social service care, and they're being recruited for child and sex trafficking. A great step we need to take immediately is to make sure that we pass a law that has law enforcement report any missing children within 24 hours. That's what they say on the ground is the primary reason we have so many issues. It is my understanding of all the problems we have at the local level that I've talked to every sheriff and elected sheriff and DA in this state to make sure I'll work with them to fight for stronger criminal sanctions for the things we need to do to protect this state. And that's why the majority of sheriffs and DAs in this state have endorsed my candidacy for Attorney General, because they know I'll work hard every single day to make Nevada.
That's time for that response. Thank you, Mr. Laxalt.
All right, our next question is for Mr. Miller. As you alluded to in your opening statements, there have been dozens and dozens of stories in the press in recent years about frauds being perpetrated upon innocent victims in Nevada. Why is Nevada such a magnet for these so-called con artists, and what should and can be done about it more than is being done now?
Well, we've become a little bit of a haven for these con artists who come to Nevada to try to prey upon our aging population. We have a significant retiree community out here of people that have stored away money to plan for their retirement, and that makes them susceptible to fraud. This is an issue that I worked on not only as a prosecutor in the DA's office, but as somebody who's, for the last 8 years, headed the securities division and going after these white-collar criminals and going after these con artists who go after our seniors. And I have a proud track record of going after these individuals, returning millions of dollars in restitutions, getting lengthy prison sentences against these individuals. I want to continue that work with the next Secretary of State to be able to make sure that we take a zero-tolerance approach and push for as aggressive prosecution as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Laxalt. Same question.
Absolutely. You know, when I think of my 88-year-old great aunt being taken advantage of by these continual fraud perpetrators, these people prey continually on our seniors, the legacy that they've passed to us. We owe it to protect them and to work hard. And there's a couple great things that we can do. Some neighboring states have created what they call a senior brigade. And you work with the communities, you work with the businesses, and you work with law enforcement. As AG, I'll put that together to make sure that seniors know that there is an outlet for them to get help. You pair that with a hotline that allows either the senior that thinks they're being frauded on or a neighbor that knows that their neighbor's being taken advantage of. This can really significantly work to bring some of these people to bear. You also need to prioritize your prosecutorial resources as the Attorney General to go after these people systematically and make sure they can't continue to do what they're doing. It is the strengths I bring with my experience in the Navy, having protected our military families, have worked very hard with very complex situations, is why Governor Sandoval and our sheriffs and DAs want me to be their partner for the coming years, because we have major issues in this state and we need to continue to come up with novel solutions to fix these problems.
Mr. Miller, anything to add?
Experience is the major difference in this race. I commend Mr. Laxalt for his military service, but he's never handled these cases. He doesn't know what these issues are really about. He's never looked these seniors in the eyes that have lost everything that they've worked in their entire lives to put away. I have, both as a prosecutor, leading these individuals up to the witness stand to have them tell their story, ultimately convincing that judge to impose a substantial sentence, then in leading the investigations to put these individuals behind bar. That's why I'll be ready on day one to go after these types of offenses, and I don't think my opponent can point to anything in his experience that has prepared him to do that.
All right, thank you. The next question is for Mr. Laxalt. Your campaign has strongly implied that your opponent was somehow involved in or complicit in an act of theft of stealing documents from your former law office. As a candidate for Nevada's highest law enforcement office, it would of course be unthinkable for you to make such an allegation without proof. So what proof do you have that Mr. Miller was involved in that situation?
I mean, if you're referring to my campaign ad that we've put out, we've made it very clear that we think using these documents are shameless. My law firm immediately stated that these did not represent the work I did at that firm. They said I was an excellent attorney, and they noted that I'm always welcome back and we would be promoted, and they said these just simply are a false representation. So if my opponent had anything to do with that or knew anything about that, of course that's a question for you guys to ask. I haven't insinuated that. The reason we've said that he's responsible for these ads is because he paid the Democratic Party $50,000. And the Democratic Party has been running ads for 2 consecutive weeks using this stolen, illegal document, and the Nevada voters are fed up with it. They're tired of this kind of thing. They want 2 guys to get in the arena, talk about their experience, talk about their vision for Nevada. They don't want this kind of attack campaign, and I'm just very disappointed that my opponent would actually fund this kind of attack ad. To your point, he is going to be the top lawyer of the state, and every lawyer knows you can't use a stolen document. Confidentiality is the most important thing for a lawyer. We all know this. That's part of our code of ethics. So that is the root of our campaign ad, and we stand by it.
Mr. Miller, your response?
Well, there's nothing more alarming than what he just said. He's running to become the state's top attorney. He has no evidence that I had anything to do with these documents being put out in the public, because I didn't. I don't know who put these documents out in the public. But here are the facts as to what happened. He went on Nevada Newsmakers and said that he had glowing reviews from his law firm. We know that wasn't true. Then when they were released and it showed how abysmal these reviews were, that they called him a train wreck, that they said he was incompetent, possible termination, he questioned the authenticity of those documents. We knew that wasn't true later, when he had to acknowledge they were in fact authentic. Then he said he hadn't seen them. We know by looking at those documents that, in fact, these attorneys had met with him, explained to him that he wasn't meeting his performance standards, and recommended that he be held back, which he was disappointed in. And now he's trying to point the finger, to shift the blame, and suggest that these things are stolen. Everything I've ever done in my career is open for the public to be able to look at and examine. Obviously, we should ask him to do the same so that he can be accountable on his record. Because the bottom line is, the people that know him best say that he's not qualified for this position. That's a significant issue, and the public should absolutely look into that.
Mr. Laxalt?
The people that know me best are the people that have endorsed me for this race. They know I'm ready to be the Attorney General. He's referring to an evaluation, a note that I still have never held in my hand. My firm stated emphatically this did not represent the views of the law firm, that I've been a very solid attorney there, represented my clients very well, and they are very upset as they've issued a 3rd statement saying this is just a misrepresentation. So for Mr. Miller to say that he is just this transparent guy, I'd like to ask, he has over $80,000 worth of credit card charges to his Chase MasterCard. These are not itemized. It doesn't say a thing about what he's spending all these campaign expenses on. I can tell you, we itemize everything. We itemize the gas I get, the McDonald's I pick up, and if he is Mr. Transparency, I think the voters deserve to know, what is he spending over $80,000 on of other people's campaign money? This is in addition to his $100,000 salary.
Next question will be to Mr. Miller. As you know, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals recently overturned Nevada's voter-approved constitutional amendment that banned gay marriage in this state. Gay marriages have begun. Do you agree with that decision? And if not, what could be done or should be done to continue the state's fight for its laws?
I absolutely agree with the court's decisions and applaud it. This was based on very solid reasoning, well-reasoned opinion. And let me be clear on this point. I stand for marriage equality. I think it was right on the policy, but it was right on the legal issue as well. And this is an issue where my opponent and I have a significant divide. Both the governor and the attorney general, the governor being a former federal judge, reviewed the case law at the time that decision was made and found that it was no longer a position that we could put ourselves in to continue that legal challenge. And we saw the court decision come out. That's in sharp contrast to what my opponent has said, who his record on this issue, on equality and human rights, is absolutely abysmal. And I encourage the public to look at some of his writings about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, where he has said some absolutely vile things about members of the same-sex community, suggesting that when it comes to hate crimes, almost sympathizing with people that would commit hate crimes. I encourage people to look at that because I think that's very indicative of the kind of attorney general he'd be.
Mr. Laxalt, do you agree with that court decision? And what, if not, what should be done to continue to fight?
You know, I've stated since the beginning of this race that what people most want right now is someone that's willing to defend the Constitution and make sure that Nevada voters, when they enact something like they did with the marriage amendment a decade ago with over 70%, that this is something the Attorney General's job is to enforce the law, not infuse personal views. Sure, I've stated my view is one man, one woman when it comes to definition of marriage, but I promised voters from the beginning of this race that I will enforce the law. The Ninth Circuit spoke very emphatically this week that the Nevada marriage amendment is struck down, and I will pledge to uphold that, and that's where we are. And so, you know, this is the crux of what's important about this race, is that I am going to defend the law regardless of my personal views. That's what people want. As I travel the state, that is, people are tired of judges and attorney generals in many other states, including our U.S. Attorney General, picking and choosing laws they like or don't like based on their own personal views. This is something I will not do as Attorney General.
Mr. Miller, your rebuttal?
Well, I think it's funny that Mr. Laxalt talks about the fact that he would enforce the law. But you look at other instances, like the Cliven Bundy situation, for example, where he defended Cliven Bundy, a man he called his friend. And in this situation, Cliven Bundy had exhausted all of his legal appeals, found to be trespassing on our taxpayer land. You know, obviously, the BLM took an overly aggressive approach in their response, but Mr. Laxalt defended it and refuses to acknowledge the basic rule of law. And so this seems to be an issue of convenience for him. When it suits his purposes, he says that I'm not going to inject myself into the policy, but when it comes to other issues, he certainly would. That's not the kind of Attorney General that I would be. I've got a strong track record of upholding the law, even in areas of policy where I don't agree.
Next question to you, Mr. Laxalt. Do you believe that state, local, or university system employees can serve in the legislature in light of the state constitution in Article 3, Section 1, that prohibits persons charged with the exercise of powers properly belonging to one of these departments exercising any functions appertaining to either of the others?
You know, the separation of powers is certainly a hallmark of our government, and it's something that's very important. That challenge is being made, and as Attorney General, it's an opinion we may have to actually be part of the case and be in front of the judges. So it's not something I'll speak about till I see how the briefings and reviews go. But it's something we need to be concerned about. I think people are worried that what's happening with government now is it's just becoming all politics, and you don't have the rule of law that can stand. If politics get in the way, then the rule of law is thrown aside. So this is something that I've, again, pledged to make sure I'm working on, and we'll look at it very seriously.
Mr. Miller, what do you think? Should state, local, or university employees be able to serve, notwithstanding separation of powers clause?
No, I think clearly we have a citizen legislature in this state, one of our longest-standing traditions, and I think it works well. They get out there, hold other jobs, they bring those perspectives to bear in serving in their elected capacity. As to the legal issue, you know, this isn't something that I would render an opinion on without the opportunity to have full briefings with my staff as Attorney General to look at the potential legal challenges. It'd be irresponsible for me to comment on that with potential litigation coming forward without having a better opportunity to fully review the facts.
Mr. Laxalt, any rebuttal?
Sure. I just want to comment on the Bundy situation. Ross Miller has flat out lied about Bundy. I've never even mentioned once that I support Cliven Bundy. I've certainly never said that he's my friend. I don't know Cliven Bundy. And he's trying to make this take advantage of a hot-button political situation and somehow try to stick me with this. And it's just grossly irresponsible of him. I've issued one statement on that, and it was exactly what the governor said, which is the federal government should not create free speech zones, and the federal government should not use force to retrieve cattle. Cliven Bundy broke the law. As the Attorney General, of course I wouldn't support someone that broke the law. That's the job of law enforcement, to make sure we make sure the law is enforced and people can't break the law.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, our next question is for Mr. Miller. In response to a complaint from a former Republican congressional candidate about your name and job title being shown on a web portal that's used for overseas military who wish to vote or register for Nevada elections, your spokesman called the complaint silly and a political stunt, but you still chose to change the website. Why did you do that?
Yeah, this is a very good question, but I want to get back to this Bundy situation because he said this was a fabrication. Look, it's on your press release. Go back and look. You issued a press release in April that directly said that the people who are involved are ranchers, fellows, friends, and fellow church-going members of our community. You said that. People asked you to retract it. You didn't. You're now trying to claim you didn't say it. I think you got a problem telling the truth here. Let me get to your question, Elizabeth, because I think it's a great question. We got a complaint. I don't think there was any merit to it whatsoever about my picture being involved on the top of the website. We put that up there for a reason, so that people know that it's an authentic website that they're dealing with when they register to vote and the like. It's on every single page on our website. It bothered somebody. We didn't think they were right, but the customer's always right. We just simply took it down, hoping to put the issue to bed. We didn't realize it was going to become such a political issue with my opponent's campaign manager continue to try to attack us day by day. Unfortunately, this is what politics has become. And Nevadans are smart enough in a battleground state to see these kind of complaints for what they are. 30 days out from the election, oh, here comes another tired ethics complaint that's completely without merit. I tried to fix it just to put the issue to bed. And now it's become a little bit of a political football, and I think that's entirely unfortunate.
Mr. Laxalt?
This complaint was filed by a former commander in the U.S. Navy, someone that has led many, many men in very tough situations. I think Mr. Miller calling this a political stunt is absolutely outrageous. He's the head of elections. Someone files a complaint to say, as the head of elections, he cannot put his name and face on a ballot. That is, in fact, the law. You cannot be within 150 feet of a polling station. Explain to me how he's allowed to put his name and face in the ballot, taking advantage of our overseas military voters. Right there, free advertisement. And what's really concerning is not only that he says this is a political stunt, is that he gets to decide whether he broke the law or not. Where is the challenge to that? Who gets to review whether or not Ross Miller has actually broken the law or not? Does he just get to decide and we're all just supposed to accept it? Everybody realizes him removing his name and face shows culpability. How many military voters saw that name and face for, was it a week? Was it 10 days? How many people saw that? How many people voted after seeing that? These are the numbers we should know, and we need to have an independent investigation. If my opponent believes he's so above the law, as he's proved many times in his career, that somehow he gets to decide and be judge and jury whether or not he's broken the law or not. This is not what we want, someone that doesn't see a conflict of interest, the most basic conflict of interest that any lawyer would see. They'd understand that when you are faced with something that you're personally...
Mr. Miller, your response.
Again, this issue is a silly, politically driven complaint. His campaign manager in the paper has been making a big deal of it, trying to shop this. This is a picture on my website. This isn't electioneering at a polling location. This is a picture on my website. And why does that exist? Because we know in battleground states that when people go to register to vote, you sometimes get these out-of-state groups. They think that they're registering with a governmental agency. They're dealing with somebody with an agenda who may throw away those registration forms. We put the state seal, my picture, the Secretary of State's office up there so that people know this is a web portal where I'm dealing directly with the Chief Officer of Elections. That serves a legitimate purpose. That's why it was up there. So to try to use this program, which is groundbreaking, tried to make it easier for our men and women in the military to vote. We've done a better job of that. We've gotten awards for our ability to do that. And to turn this into a political issue, I think is just absolutely sad.
All right, thank you. Next question's for Mr. Laxalt. In the Nevada Press Association debate, there arose some confusion about the difference between the public records law and the open meeting law. Could you, for the viewers, explain the difference and then cite, in your view, at least one possible improvement to each law in Nevada?
Sure. There was no confusion in the last debate. I merely transposed the two words, as can happen in a debate. The most important thing about both of these laws is transparency. Nevada voters want to make sure they can hold their government accountable, and our open meetings laws are there to make sure there's a set of rules that the Attorney General enforce so that they're following notice requirements and the people get to be engaged in these situations. As for public records requests, it's another tool for both the people and the press to be able to file and get access to documents, and this is another thing that we need to make sure that we're watching and being careful about. As for public records requests, I know we discussed the pricing of these documents, and it's something we need to look very seriously at. We need to make sure that government doesn't get to choose a price that prices people out of being able to access these documents. Sometimes these requests are so burdensome that they can be extremely expensive. So we've got to work very hard, and something I will absolutely get involved to make sure that government bodies do not price them out.
Mr. Miller?
I offered several proposals when asked that question at the previous debate, and I encourage the public to go back on YouTube and watch it. As for open meeting laws, we've got to put tougher requirements in place to make sure that the public bodies produce minutes on a timely manner, that we expand the authority to go after violations, much as the current Attorney General has done. With regard to public records, we've got to expand those so that they apply to local governments and ultimately give ourselves stronger tools to hold those individuals accountable. But you watch that debate, it is clear. Mr. Laxalt didn't understand even the difference between those two, which is alarming because we were talking to the Press Association. They told us in advance he didn't do his homework. And that has happened on repeated occasions on the limited instances where he's come out and tried to introduce himself to the Nevada voters. He doesn't understand the nuances of Nevada politics. That's clear. When asked about Yucca Mountain, for example, a couple months ago, it didn't sound like he even knew where Yucca Mountain was. Couldn't make up his mind. Even the governor had to come out and say, I disagree with Mr. Laxalt's position. That's embarrassing. And for an issue that's that important to our kids' public safety and our grandkids' public safety, we can't afford for our top attorney in a standoff of that nature to blink, as Mr. Laxalt did. It shows weakness.
Your response?
My statement with Yucca Mountain was taken entirely out of context. What I said, it's 2 debates in a row now, is that I will continue the fight the Attorney General is fighting right now with Yucca Mountain. And I said that at the time, and I say that now. Mr. Miller is just commenting some reporters that have decided to continue to try to attack me with literally nothing behind that. And it's unfortunate because Nevada voters just want to see who's most qualified. What Mr. Miller's talking about right now is that he's in public office. He's a career politician. He's been in for 10 years, and somehow that makes him more qualified. I think what I hear all around the state, people are tired of career politicians. They're tired of people that are just sitting in office and feel like they deserve to climb up the ladder. My opponent stated on the record that he asked whether this would be a good stepping stone for his future political career. I don't think this is a stepping stone. This is my priority to be Attorney General.
All right, our next question for Mr. Miller. The Las Vegas Sun recently made a public records request of the state for documents related to Xerox's management of the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange, but a deputy attorney general refused that request, saying the state had performed a balancing test and decided that the interest in confidentiality outweighed the public's right to know. In the absence of a statute that specifically allows the state to keep those documents confidential, isn't applying a balancing test by an agency wrong, and was that deputy wrong to deny that request?
I think that decision should absolutely be revisited if I'm Attorney General. I have made it one of my highest priorities as Secretary of State to increase transparency in government. And I've got a track record of doing that. The last 2 years, Dark money group after dark money group from the national interests have come in and wanted basically every piece of paper that my office has ever produced. And despite the fact that I've gotten counsel from the Attorney General's office that, look, we can undergo a balancing test as to whether or not these documents need to be released, we've given them absolutely everything they wanted. Mr. Laxalt himself requests thousands and thousands of pages of documents. I gave them to him. That's important because there's nothing more important at the end of the day than making sure that the public has faith in their government. And the best access to make sure that they have faith in their government is to have open records and transparency so that the Fourth Estate and interested members of the community can have access to their own documents, to be able to review it and make sure that we're making the appropriate decisions.
Mr. Laxalt, your response, was that deputy wrong to deny that request?
It's something that absolutely needs to be reviewed. As I stated for your last question, I mean, the last thing we want is government to be able to decide whether or not what the balancing test is and whether or not they can withhold documents. So we need to get involved in that and make sure that these documents are available. Transparency is key, and people are tired of backroom deals. People are tired of career politicians that hand out special favors to people that take care of them. And they take care of them whether it's with gifts or whether it's, you know, in ways that my opponent, as we've talked about throughout the campaign, taking them out to dinners and to expensive fights and ball games. You know, people are tired of having this small set of special interests have access to politicians, expecting presumably something back in return. And as long as we're talking about transparency, I bring up again, where is this over $80,000 that Mr. Miller spent on his campaign credit card? Where is all that going for Mr. Transparency? You know, he wants to claim he's transparent, yet $80,000 is an awful lot of money to most voters. Lastly, as he says, regarding to always opening records, I believe that one of these groups had to sue Mr. Miller to get access to these records, and it was a long, drawn-out battle. So I believe he's telling a tale here that he's just this open and handing over documents without a problem.
Mr. Miller, your rebuttal?
Look, I have a track record that the public is very familiar with from my service as Secretary of State. He keeps calling me a career politician. I was a criminal prosecutor before I took this job. There's been nothing more rewarding as serving as Secretary of State, for fight for issues like this, make sure that we have stronger campaign finance laws in place, stronger ethics in government. What you're hearing from Mr. Laxalt's absolute hypocrisy. He ended the last debate by saying that I was taking money from special interests and he didn't have a single lobbyist on board. Mr. Laxalt, let me introduce you to a couple of lobbyists that are here. Right here in the front row, one of your chief sponsors is a lobbyist for the nuclear industry. Your campaign manager that's sitting right here is also a major lobbyist. You can't have it both ways. Why don't you tell the Nevada voters the truth on some of these issues?
Okay, the next question to Mr. Laxalt, again referring back to that Nevada Press Association debate, the question that Mr. Miller just alluded to. You said the lobbyists are not part of your campaign. As he pointed out, Robert Einthoven is a lobbyist. You have support from Governor List. Now, there's nothing wrong with lobbyists being involved in political campaigns. It happens quite frequently here in Nevada. Lobbyists are people too. So why did you feel it was important to make that distinction?
What I was speaking to in that debate was the fact that my opponent is the candidate of the grand majority of lobbyists in this state. My opponent is supported by nearly the entire lobbyist corridor. They want him to move up the ladder. And this is the kind of thing that I'm fighting against. I think Nevadans want new blood. I consider myself part of the new generation that served in Iraq, served in Afghanistan. We want to make a difference. We want to turn things a different direction. We want to show real leadership. This is why we've come from 17 points down to an even race, because Nevada voters recognize that I can bring something unique. I can bring new energy, and someone that is not receiving, as we all found out, over $70,000 in gifts from all the special interests in this state. It's very concerning to me, someone that's going to be the top lawyer of the state and has to make major decisions about companies and our agencies, that he would take this many gifts from special interests. It's probably concerning Nevada. We're going to find out in the next few weeks. It's something I certainly worry about.
Mr. Miller?
When he talks about support that I'm getting from lobbyists is in reality support from people throughout this state. This is a race about Nevada interests, Nevada voters, Nevada groups that have come out and endorsed me. business groups from the Restaurant Association, the retailers, law enforcement organizations representing over 4,000 cops throughout this state. In sharp contrast to these dark money groups that are running these attack ads, we don't know who they are. And so ask yourself, who are these groups? Why are they so interested in buying the Nevada AG seat? He keeps saying that I don't have experience and that I'm a career politician, but look at the facts. He has not even practiced law long enough in this state to legally run for judge. Can't even put his name on the ballot. Doesn't have enough legal experience to legally file for office. He's running to become the state's top attorney. And what is going on here? Adam Laxalt has a secret. He doesn't want the public to know. That at the end of the day, when you look at his records, his qualifications, all of these documents that he refuses to put out from his performance reviews, his full military records that he clearly has access to, the people that know him best say that he's incompetent. They say he's not qualified for this job. That's why Nevadans are supporting me, and that's why these out-of-state groups are trying to buy this seat.
Mr. Laxalt, your rebuttal time.
It's absolutely appalling that he keeps attacking my military service. We've put out our military records. In fact, I encourage you to go on my website, adamlaxalt4ag.com. They are on there, and my evaluations have said, as we saw in the papers, that I was an astounding attorney. I worked in some of the most difficult environments you can imagine, including deploying to Iraq, where the legal experience I had to do there is an experience that a fraction of lawyers in the entire world have ever had to do. I have been endorsed by business groups as well. I've been endorsed by the governor, and we are running for the top cop and top prosecutor of the state, and I've been endorsed by the 15 of 17 sheriffs. The head sheriff of each county, after I interviewed with them, said, I will do the best job for Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next question from Mr. Miller. It's been an issue in the campaign, this issue of gifts and who received what and from whom and in what amounts. Some of the gifts you received, as you've pointed out, while in office were for educational events, for instance, which were sponsored by fairly neutral parties. But more troubling were gifts from prominent special interests, specifically the mining industry, station casinos, and various utilities in Nevada. Why did you choose to not at least stop taking gifts for the interim that you were campaigning through your push for reform against that very type of practice?
Well, this issue has become an issue in the political campaign, and they're running attack ads that you can't get away from, mischaracterizing this issue. And the reason that this issue has become so prominent is because I've been a pioneer on this issue, not just in pushing for more transparency in the process, but reporting absolutely everything. As you point out, the overwhelming majority of everything that I've reported constitute educational trips sponsored by nonprofits where I go out and try to work on leadership skills and work with colleagues throughout the country. But the bottom line is I put that out there for the public to see so that they can make their own judgment. There's nothing on there that poses any conflict of interest whatsoever. That's why I disclosed it. So it's unfortunate that they are trying to penalize me for disclosing, while at the same time, Mr. Laxalt refuses to release his military records. Said he didn't have them on Nevada Newsmakers. He became in the middle of a crisis after these Lewis and Roker reviews were put out in the media, criticizing his ability to become, or criticizing his background as an attorney. Lo and behold, he then puts out selected records. I think that suggests he'd had them all the time. Why don't you release them all so we can get to the bottom of this? When you say you were prosecuting terrorists in Iraq, is that true? Doesn't seem to be. It seems like you were processing paperwork. You don't have the level of experience that you claim you do.
That's your time. Mr. Laxalt?
Processing paperwork, Ross? You have any idea what it's like to go into a war zone in the middle of the surge, in the middle of the most challenging time we faced in Iraq? It's just appalling. I mean, obviously, you've never served in the military, which you could have with your 30s. Instead, you decided to sit in the Secretary of State's office and work your way up a political career. So I take grave offense that you're attacking my military record. We've released our records. They're all there. I have no idea what you're even talking about. If you talk about being a pioneer, and what you're a pioneer of is in receiving gifts. You've received more gifts than any elected official in this entire state, and it's incredible. You say that some of these are educational opportunities, yet Governor Sandoval is reporting less than $1,000 in gifts as a sitting governor, and as Attorney General accepted no gifts. you make $100,000 a year, your wife has a good job, you can pay for your own educational opportunities. People want to know, why are you taking gifts from all the special interests that Elizabeth just mentioned? What do these people want from you? It's an important question. You have to be above the law as the Attorney General. That's something I've pledged to do. I'm coming out of the military. I'm not owned by any special interest, and I'll work for you every single day I'm in that office.
Mr. Miller?
As I've said, I disclosed absolutely everything, and I've done that for a reason. I'm setting the standard in disclosing items that, by and large, don't have to be reported. So when you look at the discrepancy between the amount that I reported and what other elected officials have reported, it's because I've gone above and beyond in putting that out there so that the public can gauge for themselves whether or not they think there's any conflict of interest there. And I think the conclusion that they will reach is absolutely clear. There's no conflict there. This isn't much of an issue. I think it's time, after the millions of dollars that they've spent trying to tee this issue up, to move on. Start talking about substantive issues in this campaign. Start talking about experience. And when we get to that conversation, there is a glaring contrast in the two candidates between this race. I'm qualified. Mr. Laxalt is not.
All right, our next question is from Mr. Laxalt. As you're aware, I'm sure a petition is currently being circulated in Nevada to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. How will you, as Attorney General, navigate some of those very murky legal waters between the state acceptance of possible recreational drug use and the fact that the federal government still considers it illegal? Will you, for example, continue to assist federal agencies such as the Drug Enforcement Administration in their activities in Nevada?
No question, this is one of the most challenging legal questions we face. We have a federal government and a president that is selectively enforcing laws. Our drug laws is no exception, and it causes states major uncertainty. It's something that I'm very disappointed in, and I know Nevada voters are disappointed in. I pledge with our medical laws that are in place, we will enforce those. We will make sure that there aren't dispensaries next to schools. And if we're going to move to this next step of recreational, we need to be very careful. We need to have law enforcement at the table. Law enforcement is very concerned that this expansion will make our families and our children and our kids less safe. That concerns me deeply. But as you said, it's a complicated landmine, and we're going to have to see how it develops here in the next few years.
Mr. Miller, your position on this?
This is now the law of the land in our state, and we're not unique in this situation. It's anticipated that within the next couple of years, 3/4 of the states will have legalized some form of marijuana. Obviously, we have a medical marijuana industry that's now developing so that we can give this medicine to people that need it. It will be a critical role of the Attorney General to try to implement that program and make sure that we have the appropriate safeguards. Should recreational appear on the ballot, we'll wait and see how the public decides on that issue. I, for one, am very happy that they're running these experiments up in Colorado and Washington with their kids to make sure that they're putting appropriate safeguards, to make sure that you child-proof these packages and can keep them out of the hands of kids, and you don't see an alarming increase in DUI. If I'm fortunate enough to become elected Attorney General, I'll work with members of law enforcement and all the stakeholders within the community to make sure that we implement that program in as a responsible way as possible.
Any final words on that, Mr. Laxalt? Okay.
All right, next question to Mr. Miller. The Attorney General's office, as you know, includes the Bureau of Consumer Protection, which is supposed to advocate on behalf of ratepayers before the Public Utilities Commission. Do you think the Bureau of Consumer Protection has been aggressive enough in fighting rate increases? And if elected, will you push the BCP to do more on that?
I think this is not as simple of an issue as most people understand. I know it is very popular to immediately look at a rate increase and say we can't increase the cost. But at the same time, we're trying to do innovative things with green energy to implement technology, to require infrastructure upgrades, to try to deal with the growth as we move towards economic development, et cetera. And that takes some expenditure. And so in some instances, we may not want to step in. We may want to work with these stakeholders to make sure that we come up with a responsible solution. I have a track record as Secretary of State of being able to do just that. When we take on tough issues in the Securities Division, for example, and we've got to move forward on issues, we're always very cognizant of the fact that we bring these stakeholders to the table, try to understand their point of view before moving forward. I'll do the same thing as Attorney General.
Mr. Laxalt, what do you think? Has the BCP been aggressive enough fighting rate increases, and would you push them to do more?
I agree with Mr. Miller on this. I mean, we need to bring all the stakeholders to the table and understand the dynamic. We do need to make sure transparency is absolutely essential, and that there aren't deals going on behind the scenes that are affecting our citizens and that are going to actually increase rates without the people being able to be engaged. So it's certainly an issue that I'll be engaged in and be looking forward to when I'm Attorney General, if I'm so elected.
Mr. Miller, rebuttal?
No rebuttal.
No rebuttal. All right. Move on to the next question, and this one goes to Mr. Laxalt. Do you think the Attorney General is obligated to defend every law that is passed by the legislature? And are there circumstances that you can envision in which you would not defend a law passed by the legislature?
When I became a naval officer, I swore an oath to the Constitution, and you've got to leave your politics outside the door and you defend the law when you're in the Navy. It's something I've sworn to do as Attorney General. And, we have a duty to enforce the law of the legislature. That said, there could be some wild example where we would not be enforcing the law. I think there was mention some time ago about passing something regarding slavery. Obviously, that's something we would have been fighting tooth and nail to make sure something like that would never have been passed. And that's something that as Attorney General you wouldn't defend. But on the whole, you support and defend the law unless there's some huge exception. It's the same as an officer. You have to follow a command. You have a chain of command. You can never break that unless there's that extreme exception when you need to actually not obey an order.
Mr. Miller, any circumstance where you wouldn't defend a law passed by the legislature?
It's always tough to address hypotheticals, and I think irresponsible to do so because we want to look at any associated case law. But I have a track record of taking on these legal decisions as Secretary of State. Oftentimes where there are significant disagreements within other state agencies or within other local bodies. Term limits was a fantastic example of that. I had to step in, even though I don't agree with term limits personally, and issue challenges to some of the most powerful elected officials in the state because I felt that they were term limited out. Some DAs disagreed with me. Individuals that were in the legislature took issue with the interpretation that we had put forward. But ultimately, we prevailed. We won that case. But I have a track record of making those tough decisions and working with individuals to see if we can resolve it short of a lawsuit.
Mr. Laxalt, a rebuttal?
Mr. Miller says that he works hard and fights for things, and many months ago when an attack ad came against him, he said with his office that he was going to fight to get that ad stopped. He was going to try to sue this group. He was very upset that someone would dare attack him. And in that case, it was a Republican attack ad. I want to ask why he is not condemning the Democrat attack ads. Why has he not come out as strongly as he said he would against the Republican ads? And further, not only is he not attacking him, he's funded the Democratic Party attack ad against me. So I think it shows a lot of inconsistency in what Mr. Miller is saying.
Thank you.
All right, final question for Mr. Miller. And since we have the time, I'd like to circle back around to this issue of gifts and also the broader issue of money in politics, right? Because both parties use this issue to beat each other over the head with each and every campaign. You said in prior statements this evening that the vast majority of gifts you received were fairly innocuous educational events and that sort of thing. But an examination of the record shows that about 25% of the gifts in question, or about $20,000 out of about $80,000, were not so innocuous and did come from special interest. In general, if you had a do-over now, would you have accepted those gifts from those special interests?
Well, what I've said is that given the amount of attack ads that's been run on this issue, I think I would have taken a different course. And it's unfortunate because I've been as transparent as possible. But what you need to understand about this issue is that there's a million ways to obscure these things. When you say 25% from special interests, I imagine that you're talking about attending banquets where I sit at a table by AT&T or something at a charitable function as part of my role as a community leader. The alternate way to do that is to accept a campaign contribution from that same company and then pay for it out of my campaign funds. If you do it that way, nobody knows anything, and it's not disclosed. I have chosen the most transparent way to do that. But when you talk about money in politics, what's absolutely alarming is the amount of dark money that's coming into these races. Mr. Laxalt has completely misrepresented what's going on here, and I can't tell if it's because he's just being disingenuous or he doesn't understand the law in selectively going after these individuals. The Republican Attorney General Association has registered as a PAC. The Democratic Attorney General Association has registered as a political action committee. He knows that I gave them $50,000 because that was reported. The TAC ads I'm talking about are the State Government Leadership Foundation. Who are they? Who are these people? We still don't know there's donors. He's never called upon them to reveal themselves, hiding in the shadow, running attacks, and that's absolutely unfortunate.
That's your time, Mr. Laxalt.
I think it's pretty clear that Mr. Miller is, just basically trying to cover up the fact that gifts are gifts. In the last debate, he said very clearly, these aren't gifts. Well, obviously, at least 20,000, if not a lot more, are clearly gifts, and it's something that's very concerning. I think that's the stark contrast I bring to this race. I've never run for office before. I'm in this race because I want to serve this state. I have not received gifts. I pledged from day one to not take gifts. I've asked my opponent since day one to accept my gift pledge because I think that would be good for Nevada. I think that'd be especially good for this office, the Attorney General, the top lawyer that needs to make sure they understand conflicts of interest, and they need to make sure they know when you're a lawyer, you cannot have something that personally invests you in a case. The voters are going to have to decide whether he's personally invested for some of these special interests that are supporting him, but I certainly will continue this pledge, and I still urge him to take this pledge. Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Again, he continues to misrepresent this issue. And it's unfortunate that he's trying to attack me on one end of it, and at the other end has refused to release his military records, the full scope of them, said that he didn't have access to them initially, and when he was in trouble, released the full scope of them. He still has not come out and renounced the attacks from these dark money groups who themselves refuse to disclose their donors. That's just absolutely unfortunate. We deserve better from an Attorney General.
Well, that's all the time we have for the questions. Now the candidates' closing statements. Mr. Laxalt, you're first with your closing statement.
I'm ready to fight for Nevada, and I'm ready to bring the experience I have from the Navy, the experience I had as a professor of law, the experience I have as a prosecutor and a general counsel. I want to bring these things to this office. I want to bring something new to this office that we haven't had, some new energy, and someone that is not beholden to special interests, someone that is going to work hard every single day for Nevada. That's why I'm honored to have been endorsed by business groups. I'm honored to have been endorsed by 15 of 17 sheriffs in this state. These are the top cops. They believe I'm going to work hardest to make Nevada families safer. I'm also endorsed by Governor Sandoval, the former Attorney General. He wants me to be his partner as your Attorney General, and we'll work together for the next 4 years to make sure Nevada families are safer and Nevada continues the rise that we've had in the last few years. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I ask for your vote on November 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Laxalt. Mr. Miller.
Experience matters, and I'm ready for this job. First as a criminal prosecutor who worked to put murderers and child molesters behind bars, working on the front lines to keep our community safe. Then as Secretary of State who cracked down on election law offenses, going after Acorn, imposing record fines to members of both parties, and going after scam artists in the Securities Division. I am ready for this job, and that's why law enforcement organizations representing over 4,000 cops have endorsed my campaign, because they know that I'll put Nevadans, not personal politics, first, and that I'll be ready for this job as Attorney General on day one. Thank you.
All right, and that concludes the debate for Attorney General. We'd like to thank Republican candidate Adam Laxalt and Democratic candidate Ross Miller for participating, and we'd like to thank you for watching. Please join us next Friday for the Congressional District 3 debate at 7:30, followed by the Lieutenant Governor debate at 8:15, right here on Vegas PBS Channel 10. We'll see you then.